So it is time to take a closer look at the Lancer Dreadnoughts. They have been fixed, the siege mode works now, and the other stats of the ship are fully functional. So it will be time to dive deep into the Lancers and let's see what they can do. Now I will start with the Bane, since when they have been launched a couple months ago, this is the Lancer that I started with. So let's first take a look at the trait description. Now, they have a extender and a plate hit point bonus, as well as the capital emergency hull energizer activation time, plus 50% for the extenders and plus 120 seconds duration time on the capital damage control, which is decent. Now, the interesting thing about the Bane is that it can use missiles and lasers, as well as it has the same armor resistance bonus, and on top of that it has a plus 5% armor per skill level bonus. So the Lancer, in this case the Bane, does come with a very unique weapon trait. I mean, if you have missiles you can use missiles, if you have lasers you can use lasers. I really do like that, and that's very accurate to what we have on the EVE Online's version of the Bane. Now, tank wise, this is primarily a armor tank, but in a different video I will be doing a troll build with with the pulse crystal and with the shield boosters, because that apparently works really well. Now, onto the build. It does have the capital pulse lasers in this case installed, and there is the Doomsday device that I'll be taking a look at, and will be launching it sometime down the road in the video just to see how the effect looks. As I mentioned before, you can use lasers, you can use missiles. I usually leave the weapon choice to the player, since I know some of you have missiles, some of you have lasers, and in this case you can use either missiles or lasers, so you don't have to worry much about that. But I feel like if I were to be doing a super tank build, I think I would personally go with missiles, since the missiles don't use capacitor, and that means the capacitor can be used for the armor repairs a lot more. So when it comes to the build, depending on what you need from the ship, I guess if you want more capacitor time, then definitely go with missiles. It's, again, very situational. The Divine Punishment EM Annihilator deals 36,000 damage. And this is basically the armor Doomsday. There is 4 of them, and every Doomsday deals a different damage type. And here you can take a look at the full stats of the Doomsday. It has a lot of E-Warrior capability, which is very nice. A little fun fact: you cannot use this in low sec and in high sec. This only works in null sec, which is kind of funny. We will be testing that out down the road in this video. But yeah, that is the Doomsday, and does have some, of course, drawbacks. Makes your ship unable to cloak, cannot be fitted if you have a cloaking device. As for the medium slots, I have the classic web build, and in the medium slots I would actually prefer to have some neutralizers on the ship, but again, depending on the use and depending on what you're doing with the ship, you have a wide variety of modules available. You can even use the grappler if you like. And in the low slots I have the good old super trunk build, very similar to what I used on the Revelation a long time ago, although the only difference is I actually had a battery, only one single battery to keep the repairs running. It worked really well, and this kind of build is good if you are worried about the Dreadnought hot drops, because a build like this gives you a lot of tank. Speaking of tank, let's go to the rigs. Now this is a chonky build, chonk setup, although the Bane can do a DPS build or a balanced build between tank and DPS. Again, depending on what purpose you want to assign the ship for, you can choose between tank or DPS. Again, each build has its purpose. Of course, I mean, there is the shield tank build, which is kind of funny because technically it's very good, very tanky. I'll show you how that works in a different video, since I will have to completely rework the ship for that. And here you can take a look at the stats. 1.2 million in armor is actually really good. And as for the nanocore, you cannot use the revelation nanocore on the Bane, only the new nanocores can be used. In this case you only have like one nanocore, which is the Dragon Trend core, but you can use the ship even without a nanocore, it's not a big deal. And as for the implants, now since you can use missiles and lasers, you have a wide range of implants available. I'll be trying this out with the thermal circulation implant, just because this is a tanky build and I want to show you how much tank you can basically get out of this ship. And speaking of tank, I did not forget the Super Capital versus Lancer Dreadnought video idea that I had. I will be doing that as well, because I want to show you how tanky these things can be, and will allow me to show you a lot of different weird and odd builds that end up working really well for ships that should not be shield tanked. Kind of funny how that works, but yeah, we'll come to that. I did not forget, don't worry. I will be doing the Dreadnought versus Super Capital video very soon. Probably already working on it. So let's take a look at the active stats of the ship. So by default, this ship should have about 25 to 50% more armor than the Revelation, based on the skills and based on the overall bonuses that you get on the ship. 13.4 million hit points, 90, 93, 92 and 91% armor resistance, which is pretty decent, and that is definitely pretty tanky. Of course, you have the siege mode, and with the siege mode you enhance the armor repairs, but the siege mode on the Lancers is a little bit different. Besides having everything else exactly the same as the normal Dreadnoughts, you do get a Doomsday bonus on the siege mode on the Lancers. And here you can just take a look at the armor repair that you can get on the ship. Definitely can be much better, but you know, that is with the current repairs. 72,000 damage, EM damage with the Doomsday now. That's because the siege mode does give you a plus 100% bonus on the damage of the siege mode, which is actually a very significant amount now. 72,000 should be enough to destroy up to a cruiser, maybe in some cases a battle cruiser. So overall, it does do some interesting damage for sure. And here you can take a look at the siege mode stats of the Lancer here. And the siege mode basically is the same for all the Lancers. So it's going to be the same on the Karura, will be the same on the Hubris, and of course will be the same on the Valvern. But of course they all have different Doomsdays, of course. That's one thing that you have to remember. Every Lancer has its own Doomsday, although you can use any, but I usually like to keep the nation specific Doomsday on the ship. Now, of course, I will be eating this ship at a laboratory, but still haven't really covered all the builds yet, so we'll dock in a second to change the build and basically to show you some more ideas.
Docking request accepted.
That you can basically utilize on this ship. So that was kind of a full-on tank build. You can do a battery build on the ship if you like. Battery builds always work, but if you do a battery build, you will sacrifice some of the resistance. Now the ship does have a bonus on armor plates and shield extenders. In, let's say, a big fleet, if you have logistic ships, if you have force auxiliaries, you can actually go and do a plate build on the Bane. And technically you can also combine plates with armor repairs on the ship, but I personally was never really a fan of that. I just keep either passive or active, never combining both, but on the ship it might actually work. In this case, I will be doing a full-on passive armor build, since it does have a bonus on plates, and the plates can be good if you are in a fleet, big fleet, when you don't want to spend your capacitor on repairs, where you can maximize the overall resistance and hit points and rely for repairs on your fleet. And that's basically the idea behind something like this. 7.6 million hit points. Now this should be pretty tanky. Definitely will have a lot more hit points than with the ordinary repairs, but you will not be able to repair your armor on your own, of course. That's the largest drawback. I mean, it's a passive tank, so no big surprise there, I guess. But let's see the stats. 18.4 million, 90, 93, 92 and 91% resistance, which is pretty decent. And of course you have the damage control, which will give you 89.7 million hit points, which is actually, I would say, pretty decent. 98 and 99% resistance on the armor, so basically 15
Docking
seconds
request
of
accepted.
immortality. Or if you have the energizer, the capital damage control, which only affects the hull, by the way. With the capital damage control, the passive resistance is definitely slightly higher, so you can definitely get a lot more tank out of the ship. Now that was a build with 2 plates. You can do a build with 3 plates, in some cases even 4 plates. More than 4 modules of the same type is kind of not recommended to be used because of the penalty, so 3-4 is basically the upper limit. And of course you can use a damage control alongside, and this is kind of a very chunky ship now. 9.4 million hit points in the station, that's not bad. Of course this type of build is not for solo, this is more for a fleet and for big, well, technically for big fleets where you have armor guardians and link modules. Technically 100% resistance across the board if you are flying this type of build into a proper armor fleet, which can be fun. I would say armor is definitely much more multi-purpose nowadays than it used to be. Definitely armor is what players prefer the most on their ship. I mean, most of my ships nowadays are kind of passively tanked, shield or armor. So yeah, I guess I kind of do fall under that category. Anyway, let's quickly take a look at the active resistance profile. 19.9 million hit points, 88, 93, 92 and 91. Slightly lower resistance, but overall in general it's about the same. And with the damage control active, you have 97 million hit points, which is pretty good. Definitely not a ship that will get destroyed that easily. 2.2 million armor hit points, which is really nice. But at the same time, using plates on Dreadnoughts can be, I guess, useful. On Lancers, at least, it can be useful. On the normal Dreadnoughts, I wouldn't really be
Docking request
using a
accepted.
passive tank, since there is no plate bonus on the other classic Dreadnoughts. Now there's a question, well, can you actually do a classic DPS build? Honestly, you can. And in a decent fleet where you have a lot of logistics and where you have guardians and of course armor link modules and stuff like that, you can actually afford to make a DPS lancer, since your resistance will be pretty high with minimal adaptives and with minimal tanking, mostly because all the stats will come from the fleet and most of the resistance will come from the fleet. So technically you can do a glass build, which would work really well. Again, kind of a fleet oriented idea, not something I would do solo, but again, you can fly a Lancer solo, I guess, but not really recommended to do that. And for a DPS build, I would actually do the classic DPS build that we usually see on most ships. Of course, not like there's not only like one specific way to do this. You can go with full adaptives. You can put all sorts of different modules in the low slots. This is basically just what I usually have fitted on my other ships. Now, as for the rigs, well, if you're going with a DPS build, you can actually keep one defensive rig, one defensive integration, just to be there, since it can be helpful for extra resistance. But the other two rigs can easily be focused on DPS, and I would use two burst laser rigs, or if you like missiles, the hydraulic bay launchers, the missile rig that increases the rate of fire. Basically, that's what you would use if you were to use missiles. Now, as for the implants, as I mentioned before, if you're using missiles, tactical missiles work at charge. If you use the lasers, pulse crystal and focus crystal. The pulse crystal is actually really good. The pulse crystal in some cases does give you a much higher DPS output than focus crystal. The best, I guess, benefit from pulse crystal is the instant DPS. You get the DPS basically instantly when you click on the button, which for a Lancer is actually pretty nice. They have a lot of capacitor, and again, in a fleet, this does look like it could be ideal, although at the same time you can use the focus crystal as well. Both work, so if you have the focus crystal, that's fine. If you have the focus crystal, that's also fine. 7.2 million hit points, actually not bad, still has plenty of hit points there. 10,000 DPS with the implant active. Let's siege up. This is going to have a lot of DPS, by the way. 42,000 DPS. We are approaching super capital territory now. 48,000. 54,000. This is now 58,000, and with the fourth one we have 60,409.67 DPS on the Bane, which is actually really close to Lancers, or pretty close to super capitals. Of course, this is like I would say the lowest possible estimate that you can have, since I'm not really using anything out of the ordinary. But if you have like an nanocore for it, if you have like better weapons, better modules, better general units, you can definitely push about 80 to 100,000 DPS on the Bane with a build like this. And this build also does have some tank attached to it. In a fleet, we would have very nice DPS and you would have very nice tanks, so you get the best of both worlds. Now, can you use this ship for PvE? Well, obviously the answer is yes. They can still enter high sec until the 27th or 28th of April, so yeah, just about 10 days left, and then they will be forbidden from entering high sec. But this is basically the Lancer / classic Dreadnought build that I would use. For PvE, high angle weapons, definitely the way to go. And for the implant, focus crystal or pulse crystal, I'll leave that up to the player, since I know not everyone has like every implant. So if you have the pulse crystal, that's fine. If you have the focus crystal, that's fine. Both will get the job done. But this build is very much inspired by the previous high-angle weapon build lancers that that I made. Since, you know, you will be fighting with sub-capitals, you want to track them, and for that purpose, the high-angle weapons are just perfect. So that's basically what I would do.
Warp drive active.
Basically what I would use on them. Now I have two tracking computers, in case something fast approaches. Tracking computers are kind of a must-have if you want to use the ships for PvE, since you definitely need every single bit of tracking that you can get. After all, don't forget, these ships are big ships, they're capitals, and they don't move while sieged up. And unfortunately, I landed right at the top of the station. The hitbox of the station kind of sucks. Are you serious? Like, the developers really need to rework the hitbox of this object right here, because I mean, it's basically the station that has this weird hitbox, right? Even in some other PvE activities like exploration, I usually avoid the exploration site with this anomaly, with this like object with the station in, because you can get stuck very easily and you cannot get out that easily when you get stuck. But for a couple seconds here, this is definitely the fastest Lancer ever. Was able to hit like 3 kilometers per second, which is impressive. Faster than those elite ships chasing me at the moment, which is, when you think about it, kind of funny. But I need to stop the ship. I need to stop the ship so I can actually start shooting, but I got bumped so hard I will have to warp off and warp back in. Now, I mentioned on the start of the video that you can't use the Doomsday in low sec and high sec. Well, we're about to test that out. I mean, it makes sense that you cannot use it in high sec, although I wish that you could use it in high sec. If we could use that in high sec, Yita would have been on fire. That's just what I'm saying. You can bet that if we could use Doomsday in high sec, that Yita would have been a war zone. Would be definitely a lot of dead Lancers, but they would be ISK positive. The thought of that is pretty much hilarious when you think about it. But let's test out the theory. Can you launch Doomsday in high sec? Well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. We're about to find out. I was waiting for this moment for a very long time. I was kind of sad that the tester was bugged for so long. They fixed this, like the day they fixed this, that's when I hopped on and I started to record, and I did promise that I will cover all of the Lancers, and I'm covering them obviously. I just wish I could cover them on day one properly. I mean, I technically did cover them, but I wasn't really happy with the output because at the end I didn't really do much besides a build. Didn't fly the ship, and I usually like to fly the ship just so I can show you what you can expect from the ship. Now, the Doomsday device can only be activated when your ship is basically stationary below 5 meters per second. So it is a very tactical module, and the Doomsday does have its use. And yeah, you cannot use the Doomsday in high sec, it's prohibited. Okay, well, kind of expected that. Or else we would see Doomsday devices being used all over Yita by now. Kind of what I expected to happen. Which is a good thing and a bad thing. A bad thing because it definitely would be hilarious to just see Doomsdays popping all over high sec. Bad, and the good thing is, well, I guess you don't have to worry about accidentally firing the Doomsday at Concord. That would be fun. But yeah, the pulse crystal, the pulse crystal definitely does have a very good kick to it. Honestly, when I saw the DPS output on this thing, I was kind of impressed. With the current build, it does push about 25,000 DPS, which is not obviously not bad. Very, I would say it's a little bit better than the DPS output on the Navy Apocalypse, with about the same type of build. I would say technically the high angle weapons are large weapons, kind of large weapons, so you can expect about the same DPS, same performance as we have seen on the larger weapons. When I say large weapons, I'm referring to long range weapons. That's basically the closest uh, reference point for the high angle Dreadnought weapons that we have. Definitely not as much tracking as the close range large weapons, but definitely not as bad as it looks. They definitely have decent tracking. And of course I do have tracking computers, so I am not worried about tracking issues at all. And actually I would say, if you want to fly a properly fitted high angle weapon built Dreadnought, your tracking computers should be using the tracking script, since range isn't usually a big problem, but tracking is usually a problem. So tracking is very important. And besides tracking, grappler can be useful, and capital neutralizers can also be useful. Now, I don't have them because I don't really need them. I'm doing PvE, but if you are in allsec, couple neutralizers are definitely very handy, since those neutralizers have a very good effect on subcapitals. Basically, one or two cycle of capital neutralizers and you can empty the capacitor of a larger ship. Of a large ship like a battleship, for example. Anything below a battleship, its capacitor gets instantly capped. And that's basically what we used to use. That's what I used to have on my revelation. My revelation was basically a kind of like a big Balgorn. Of course, obviously it's not an actual like Balgorn or not a Tremors, but the idea is about the same. And I used capital neutralizers on the revelation to basically delete capacitors and to disable the tanks of some specific ships that we have engaged in the past, of course, with very high with a very high success rate. I think I use like 3 capital neutralizers, and honestly that was pretty wild. That felt really good. And you can do the same thing with the Lancer. It works the same way. Actually, you can easily break like camps with Lancers. You can do solo versus fleet stuff with Lancers with high angle weapons. I mean, I used to solo fleets with the Revelation that's worth thrown at my ship, and that's some of the most fun I've ever had in the game. That was with and without implants, by the way. With the implants made tanking much easier for my ship, because I could just enhance the tank and modules a lot more. If there's anything I miss about the Revelation, I miss smashing fleets with it. That was one of my favorite activities with the ship, and I was very good at it as well. But the Revelation remains, I think it's like still my most successful ship ever. I don't think many ships were able to outperform my Revelation. That thing was wild. So let me go and attempt to launch the Doomsday in low sec. We have tested out, obviously the Doomsday device doesn't work in high sec, but does it work in low sec? Now, based on my memory, it should not be working in low sec, but again, we will be testing that out. And down the road, in a different video, which I'll be working on, I will be testing out the Doomsday devices
Warp
on
drive active.
super capitals, because I'm actually very curious to see how it would affect a super carrier. I'm fairly sure it can kill the fighters. The Doomsday can kill the fighters, so could potentially be a interesting little test. These things can cripple super carriers if they are organized in a good fleet, and of course if the ships are built properly. It is not impossible to tank super carriers. It's actually fairly easy to do so, if of course you have a good fleet and a good coordination. A good fleet and good coordination is like 90% of work, of effort.
We're under attack.
So, let me lock on the ships. Again, you cannot launch the
We're
Doomsday
under
device
attack.
unless your ship is almost stationary, so it will take a while for me to actually stop this thing and prevent it from moving. And of course I have to siege up so that I can get most effect out of the Doomsday. Still slowing down. But siege mode will be up in a minute or two. I actually thought that the implants would enhance the Doomsday in a way, but they don't, thankfully. It will be fun if it will be fun if implants actually enhance the Doomsday. Imagine a Lancer Doomsday that does like 200,000 damage. Will be fun. And yeah, the Doomsday doesn't work in low sec, which is something that personally I did expect. Again, based on my memory, I think I remember that this does not work in low sec, and it doesn't. Which is again a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing you don't have to worry about Doomsdays being placed on you in low sec. A bad thing, well, maybe a bit of fun is lost, but can you launch Doomsday in low sec? I'm fairly sure you can, and that's the next thing that I'll be doing. After all, we need to see that Doomsday effect. It should definitely be glorious. So, and I honestly cannot wait for Titan Doomsday. Oh man, that's gonna be. Those are the big Doomsday, right? That's gonna be fun. Okay, so let me go to the station, and let me yeet the Doomsday at the station. I think that's gonna be quite funny. But how do I feel about the Bane? Honestly, it's a good ship. Definitely has more hit points than the Revelation, but it is not a Navy Dreadnought, and the developers confirmed a couple weeks ago or months ago that the Navy Dreadnoughts are not planned. So unfortunately, the super tanky Dreadnoughts are not going to be added. Not going to be added soon. I mean, they're focusing on small stuff, which is fine, I guess, but I kind of was excited about those. I was really excited about those Navy Dreadnoughts. I would actually buy a Navy Revelation, but I guess maybe a different time. If you do like tank though, the Bane doesn't disappoint with tank. It has a good amount of tank attached to it, and fairly tanky, fairly good DPS as well. So they're good ships. They're definitely good ships. So let's lock on the station. Of course, you have to have your ship aligned in the general direction of the target, since that's a directional weapon. I have to lock the target, and you have to shoot basically in front of your ship. That's how the lens works. So ship is stopped, siege is up, and Doomsday is firing. Well, it works. Very glad that I actually see this work. This is the spool up, I guess. It's charging up, and I do like the effect. It looks awesome, really. And it's firing. Yikes! Now this looks scary. Not gonna lie. Yeah, I definitely do not want to be on the receiving end of that. Also has a nice little blue effect. It's beautiful. Definitely beautiful for sure. And the station, that's the Death Star. Can you imagine that this is the Death Star just eating Doomsday? Yeah, well, I mean, it's not eating Doomsday, but you probably understand what I'm trying to say here. And well, that was the divine Doomsday for the Revelation. And here you can take a look at the consequences of using it. Cannot move, cannot jump, cannot cloak for a couple minutes, which is, I guess, a fair drawback. But with that being said, that would be it for the Bane, at least for today. This is a very interesting ship, I like it, and overall I'm very excited to see and test out the other lancers. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.